love is this, oh my soul, my soul? What wondrous love is this, oh my soul? What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, for my soul, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul.
Hello, Pastor Gavin Whitcomb Sr. here. Welcome to Old Testament Survey as we continue our study book by book, and we're going to be looking at the book of Song of Solomon. So thanks for joining this podcast and the Boiling Point podcast as we produce this series together. Now, the Song of Solomon, as the name implies, was written by King Solomon, who, of course, was the son of David. And we believe the date was somewhere around 1014 BC. Now, not necessarily exactly that date, but somewhere in that general time frame. And so this is a part of the poetic section of Scripture. So it's not historical narrative, and it's not like a pedantic teaching line by line. It is a poem. And so in chapter 1 it says a song of songs, which is Solomon's, and we know that Solomon wrote over 1,000 songs. So he was a multi-talented guy endued with wisdom. So I prepared an outline that I think will be helpful to you if you look at this with me. The theme of the Song of Solomon, it's a love poem that describes the relationship between Solomon and a Shulamite woman who becomes his wife. It reveals a romantic love between a man and a woman, and its physical expression in marriage is good and is a part of God's plan. So the love portrayed in the book is believed by many to illustrate God's love for his people and the love that we should have for the Lord. So there are three primary figures. First, you have, of course, Solomon. Then you have the Shulamite woman. What's a Shulamite woman? Well, it's a woman from the area known as Shulam, which would be north of Jerusalem, but it would be southwest of the Sea of Galilee. So north of Jerusalem, Shulam. So this woman was from Shulam, the Shulamite woman. And then thirdly, there are the daughters of Jerusalem. That's other women who live in Jerusalem who are the companions of the Shulamite woman. Now, there are different interpretations of the Song of Solomon, and I've read over it and studied it in detail numerous times. And after doing so, like in my Bible, you'll see that if you read it, there will be some things that the bride says, then the groom says. And so when I was studying over it and reading it, if you read it carefully, you'll be able to tell which one says what. So there are different interpretations. One interpretation that some people have of this is that King Solomon meets a Shulamite woman, and he brings her to the palace and wants to marry her, wants to take her in as one of his many wives into his harem. But she's in love with a shepherd boy. So while Solomon's trying to win her and woo her, she's saying, but my love is, he's the greatest, and I'm in love with him, and so forth. And I don't believe that that's the case, because one problem with that interpretation is that Solomon would be the villain. Would he write a poem and portray himself as the villain? And so to try to talk this woman into just forgetting about her true love and marrying him, I just don't see that happening. And the woman doesn't give any indication that she's unhappy to be there and to be ready to be taken in as one of the king's wives, or maybe at this point the king's first wife and only wife. I think what is more likely is this, and I reached this conclusion after reading it and studying it and putting two and two together. Solomon owned a vineyard. Okay, and it says here in chapter 8, verse 11, Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He let out the vineyard to keepers. Everyone for the fruit thereof was to bring 1,000 pieces of silver. Okay, so back then, if you had several vineyards, you would let one out or rent it out. You would let guys raise the grapes, and then as part of their pay, they would get to keep a portion of the harvest of the grapes. So Solomon had this vineyard that he let out, and it says in verse 12, "My vineyard which is mine is before me. Thou, O Solomon, must have 1,000, and those that keep the fruit thereof 200." Okay, so he would get 1,000 pieces of silver from it, and those who would keep it would get 200 pieces of silver. And I guess that amount in grapes. So the way that and then if you read this, Solomon goes out to inspect one of his vineyards, and he takes some sheep out, and he goes disguised as a shepherd. Like, he doesn't want anybody to know who he is. He doesn't want anyone to know that he's the king. So here, the Shulamite woman is out tending to the vineyard. Now, let me read you what she says in verse 1. "Look not upon me because I am black, because of the sun hath looked upon me." Now, she didn't mean that she was like black like an African, but very dark from the sun. "My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard have I not kept." And then she talks about here that Solomon, he went out to tend to the sheep and to look after sheep and look after his vineyards. So anyway, this woman is out there tending to one of Solomon's vineyards. And Solomon, who is the king, comes disguised as a shepherd. And he sees this beautiful woman, strikes up a conversation, and falls in love with her. And but he does not tell her that he's the king. So she has no idea that Solomon is the king. She just thinks that he's a shepherd. And she falls in love with him, and he promises her one day he will come back and he'll marry her. And so finally, one day he comes back to take her to the palace to be married to him. But now he comes in all his glory as the king. He comes with his chariots, and she sees, wow, the shepherd who I fell in love with, that's King Solomon. I had no idea. So in chapter 3, it says, "Who is this that cometh out of the wilderness, like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh, and frankincense, with all powders of merchants? Behold his bed, which is Solomon's." In other words, his couch or litter that they're carrying. 60 valiant men are about it. So he comes with 60 armed soldiers surrounding him, of the valiant of Israel. They all hold swords, being expert in war. Every man hath his sword upon his thigh because of fear in the night. King Solomon made himself a chariot of the wood of Lebanon. He made the pillars thereof of silver, the bottom thereof of gold, the covering of it purple, the middle of it there being paved with love for the daughters of Jerusalem. Okay, so he comes and picks her up. She finds out, wow, the shepherd is the king. So the book begins with her getting ready to be married. And so while she's awaiting the final wedding ceremony or the wedding feast, the daughters of Jerusalem, her female companions, are talking to her. So she says here, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth." In other words, your name is great smelling too because of your character. "Therefore do the virgins love thee." So other, virgins love you as well. "Draw me, we will run after thee. The king hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee." So see, here she is in the king's chambers. And then she starts to have sort of like a flashback and talk about and remember how they met. And then it describes how, on their wedding night here, wedding day or wedding night, in chapters 1 and 2, they're expressing their love and their admiration for one another. So this is a love poem, and it is pure, it is holy, because it's between a husband and a wife. Make no mistake about it. This is the husband talking to the wife, Solomon talking to his wife. And so they say things like, while the king sits, this is chapter 1, verse 12, this is the bride speaking. While the king sits at his table, my spikenard sends forth the smell thereof. A bundle of myrrh is my well-beloved. He shall lie all night between my breasts. So this is very, very romantic, a celebration of married love. It's even sexual, which for a husband and wife is holy and good and pure. That's really the arena for which God created sex. Then he says to her, behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes. And then she says, behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant also, and our bed is green. And so they talk and express their love and admiration for one another. He thinks she's beautiful. She thinks he's handsome and admirable. And she says, I am sick of love. In other words, I'm love sick, love struck. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand doth embrace me. And so it goes on to, they talk to one another and express their love and admiration for one another. And she says, or he says, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. Come and get away with me. And in verse 16 in chapter 2, she says, my beloved is mine and I am his. He feeds among the lilies. In other words, he's feeding his flock among the lilies, but I am mine. He is mine and I am his. We belong to each other. Then she says, until the day break and the shadows flee away. In other words, throughout the night until daylight, turn, my beloved, and be that thou like a roe or a young hart upon the mountains of Bether. So I think what she's referring to is to, be on top of her, like a young roe would be upon the mountains. Now, in chapter 3, the bride has a dream. And she says, by night on my bed, I sought him whom my soul loveth. I sought him, but I found him not. So she has this dream that she's looking for her beloved, and she's looking all over the place, and she can't find him. And she goes into the city of Jerusalem and asks the watchman, have you seen my love? And they say no. And finally she finds him and hugs him and will not let go of him. So that's one of the dream that she has here. And so they continue to express their love for one another. And the bridegroom arrives to pick her up. And so they exchange admiration for one another. And let me read to you here a few examples of this. Behold, thou art fair, my love. Thou art fair. You have dove eyes within your locks. Your hair is like the flock of goats that appear from Mount Gilead. Thy teeth are like a flock of sheep. They're even shorn, which came up from the washing. So she has nice, straight teeth, whereof everyone bear twins, and none is barren among them. So she's not missing any teeth, right? Thy lips are like a thread of scarlet. Thy speech is comely. In other words, a beautiful voice. Thy temples are like a piece of a pomegranate within thy flocks. Thy neck's like the tower of David builded for an armory, wherein you would hang 1,000 bucklers. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins, which feed among the lilies. Until the day break and the shadows flee away, I will get me to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. In other words, all night long until daylight, he's going to be on top of the mountain of myrrh and on top of the hill of frankincense. So this speaks of, their wedding night and their sexual introduction to one another. And this is all purely and holy because it's a man and a woman who are married. He says, "You have ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with one chain of thy neck." So, boy, just looking at you, just the sight of you, blows me away. And he says, "A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse." He calls him his sister because she's now your family, my spouse. When you get married, you become a family. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse. A spring shut up, a fountain sealed. So what that's saying is that she kept herself pure, remained a virgin until their wedding night. Thy plants are an orchard of pomegranates with pleasant fruits, camphor with spikenard and all kinds of spices, a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters and streams. And then she says, "Awake, O north wind, and come, thou south, blow upon my garden, that the spices may flow out. Let my beloved come into his garden and eat his pleasant fruits." Now, you know what the garden is, right? So she is inviting her husband to come and eat in his garden, to partake of the pleasant fruits. In other words, invite him to join with her in sexual union. So he says in chapter 5, verse 1, "I'm coming to my garden, my sister, my spouse." So I did, I took you up on your invitation. I gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. So it speaks of, enjoying one another physically on their wedding night. Now, in chapter 5, there's another dream that the bride has, and this dream is a nightmare. She says, "I sleep, but my heart waketh." What's that mean, I sleep, but my heart waketh? Well, she's having a dream, right? "It's the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled, for my head is filled with dew, and my locks with a drop of the night." So he comes to the door and says, "Hey, open up the door, unlock the door, and let me in." He was out all night, tending his flocks, and now he wants in. But she says, "Oh, I've put off my coat. How shall I put it on? I've washed my feet. How shall I defile them? How shall I get my feet dirty?" Now, this is in the dream. And in the dream, she's being too selfish to get up and unlock the door to let her beloved in. And in verse 4, "My beloved put in his hand by the hole of the door, and my bowels were moved for him." In other words, my heart was moved. "I rose up to open to my beloved." So she thought again, "Man, I'm being selfish. I got to get up and open that door." "And I rose to open to my beloved, and my hands dropped with myrrh, which is a sweet-smelling fragrance, and my fingers with a sweet-smelling myrrh upon the handles of the lock. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had withdrawn himself and was gone." So by the time she finally gets up to open the door, he's gone. So she calls to him, and there's no answer. And she's thinking, "Oh no, where is my love?" So she goes out into the city. The watchmen find her, and it says, "The watchmen found me, they smote me." So they hit her, they struck her, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls took away my veil from me. So in this nightmare, she goes out, and the city guards beat her up, and so that, the dream finally ends, that nightmare. And so they continue to express their love for one another. He says in chapter 5, verse 16, "His mouth is most sweet. Yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem." That verse there, my wife and I had printed on when we got married, on the program that we handed everybody, about the wedding and told about our ceremony. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, because my wife and I are, not only do we love one another in a romantic way, the way a man and woman do, but we're also best friends. So she's my beloved and my friend, and she would say the same. So that's how it continues. They express admiration for one another. And she says, my beloved has gone down into his garden to the beds of spices to feed in the gardens, to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. So, we belong to each other. And he says to her, turn away thine eyes from me, for they have overcome me. In other words, he's saying, oh, please turn away from me because your eyes are just so beautiful. They've overcome me. And in chapter 7, he talks to her. He says, how beautiful are thy feet with shoes, O prince's daughter. The joints of thy thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a cunning workman. Thy navel is like a round goblet that lacks not liquor. Thy belly is like a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Thy two breasts are like two young roes that are twins. Thy neck is as a tower of ivory. And he goes on and on. How fair and how pleasant art thou, O love, for delights. Now, then he says, this thy stature is like to a palm tree, and thy breasts to clusters of grapes. I said, I will go up to the palm tree. I will take hold of the boughs thereof. Now also thy breasts shall be as clusters of the vine, and the smell of thy nose like apples. So he's saying, hey, your breasts are like palm trees and clusters of grapes. I'm going to climb the tree and shake the tree and grab the clusters of the vine. And he says, in the roof of thy mouth like the best wine for my beloved, that goeth down sweetly. So beloved means somebody who is the object of your love, causing the lips of those that are asleep to speak. I am my beloved's, and his desires towards me, she says. Come, my beloved, and so she continues, come, my beloved, let's go forth into the field. Let's lodge in the villages. Let's go up early to the vineyards. Let's see if the vine flourishes, whether the tender grape appear and the pomegranate bud forth. There will I give thee my loves. So she's saying, hey, let's go early in the morning. We'll go into the vineyard and I'll give you my loves. Okay. And so that's the final chapter of the book. He says, love is strong as death, jealousy is cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are coals of fire, which are the most vehement flame. So he compares love to a hot burning fire. And he says in verse 7, many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would be utterly contemned or despised. So what he's saying is that true love can't be destroyed, and it can't be purchased or bought, right? You can't buy true love. I remember growing up that the Beatles had a song called Money Can't Buy Me Love. And that's certainly true. And so true love can't be destroyed or purchased. Many waters cannot quench it. And so that's basically the way that the psalm ends. My vineyard, which is mine, is before me. Verse 13, thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions hearken to thy voice, cause me to hear it. Now, there are some people that say, oh, the purpose of this is it shows God's love for his people, or illustrates it, or Christ's love for the church. Well, it's true that God does have a love for his people, and Christ loves the church. But the main meaning of this is that married love between a man and a woman who are married to one another is a beautiful thing, a gift of God to be celebrated, and it is pure and right and holy. And that's the main purpose of the book. So that's the conclusion of our survey of the book of Song of Solomon. And don't forget to stay tuned for the after show where we delve into some more details, and we also answer some questions that JD has, and maybe even you might have as well. Thanks for being with us for Old Testament Survey and the Boiling Point podcast.
What wondrous love is this, oh my soul, my soul? What wondrous love is this, oh my soul? What wondrous love is this? Here comes the Lord of bliss, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, for my soul. To bear the dreadful curse for my